Hi, everybody. It's good to see you today. Thank you for joining us for what will hopefully be the first of many workshops and webinars in conjunction with the upcoming Empowering Commission Pastors Conference, which has now been changed to October 7 through 10. I'm Nanette Cagney. I'm the moderator of the ECP conference, as we call it. I'm a member of the steering committee. And I'm a commissioned pastor here in Lake Charles, Louisiana. We are very happy to have you with us for our authentic worship online this afternoon, I guess. Our webinar is going to be led by Thomas Riggs, who is our communication and administrative coordinator for the Synod of the Son, and by Reverend Tim Gray, the co-pastor at University Christian Church in El Paso, Texas. If you have any questions during the course of the webinar, hit your Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and our presenters will take questions at the end of the presentation. Again, thank you for signing up for the conference. Thank you for being here with us today, and hopefully we'll see you many times between now and October. With that, I will turn it over to Thomas.
Well, hello everyone. Again, my name is Thomas Riggs, and I am the Communications Administrative Coordinator for Synod of the Son. I am going to try to manage a webinar and talk to you at the same time. So if I tend to pause or do something of that nature, it's because I'm trying to catch up. I am also that person that has been sending you email updates of the status of this conference that you signed up for. So if you're wondering who that guy was that's been sending you emails over the past couple of months, that would have been me. And again, on behalf of the design team of the event, I welcome you to this first online workshop. I am aware that the design team is in the process of creating more of these workshops leading up to our conference. And now I'm going to pass this over to Tim to let him introduce himself.
Good afternoon, y'all. I'm used to being on Zoom and seeing a hodgepodge of different faces. I don't get to do that this time, so I guess I'll just look over here. So my name's Pastor Tim Gray. I'm actually the co-pastor at University Presbyterian Church in El Paso, Texas. And Tom asked me to come in and talk to y'all about authentic worship during these times of Zoom and YouTube and Facebook Live and whatever else we are using to proclaim God's word and gather together as communities. And in a few moments, actually, Tom is going to go over some slides with some examples of what other churches have been doing, different ways that they have used this new context to continue their work, continue to gather, continue to proclaim, and continue to celebrate God's grace in our midst. But first, I wanted to give perhaps a little introduction to those examples, those ways of expressing church in our communities, and so. Yeah, I've been asked to talk about authentic worship or authentic church and what these things look like today. And like a good pastor, I'm not going to give you a straight answer. It really depends on your context. It depends on you. It depends on your community, on what authentic worship looks like. I was taught that authentic worship is the experience of God's truth in the recognition of who and where we are and the recognition of who and where God is. And so really we have several questions that come up when we want to talk about authentic worship in the age of isolation, social distancing, and coronavirus. What is authentic worship for you? What is authentic worship for your community? And what is authentic worship for God? These questions, I'm sure you have been challenged by, spent considerable time in, and come up with reasonable answers in your congregations already. The answers have been how you and your community have designed how you how you all sing together, or how communion happens, and not just what happens in a few moments in church, but how that communion goes out to those who are homebound or in hospital bound, or wherever they are. You've been doing this work of interpreting what authentic worship is in your communities already. As pastors, this has been your business, to take people's realities, your congregation's individual and common experiences of God, the prophetic and pastoral realities that God is placing in your communities, gathering these realities and designing liturgies and prayers and movements and everything else to make authentic worship. I bring this up for two reasons. One is to encourage you. You have been doing this work of translating people's faith and your community's faith and their lives into wonderful confrontations and embraces of God. I also bring this up to be reminded that this is not just simply a technical challenge, but also an adaptive challenge. It's not just how do I record and upload my sermon onto YouTube, although that is a difficult challenge for some of us, but also how is watching this sermon on YouTube worshipful? Your worship committee has spent time thinking about how your church is laid out. Some time should be thinking about the environment of your worship now. Your context and your congregations are going to be very diverse, but I bring this up because the technical challenges are pretty darn overwhelming, but it's also speaking to the adaptive challenges that make worship authentic. And let me say that again. While the technical challenges can be overwhelming, it's speaking to the adaptive challenges that you and your congregations are being challenged by right now that makes worship authentic. I don't have a book that I've written. I don't keep a blog with the top 10 lists. I don't do any of that stuff. What I have are my experiences as a pastor and one of the youngest leaders in my church at this moment. And so I wanted to share a little bit of how I and we as a church have been confronting these adaptive challenges and then working through those technical challenges like YouTube and Zoom and the TV behind me, which won't keep a picture on. So these are a couple of principles that have been helping us think this through. So one is focus on what matters. Your church has a set of values that are important to your identity as a group. Make sure that these values don't get put aside. If your value is being lost, if your values are being lost in translation to your new way of worshiping, speak to it. Let your community wrestle with that challenge with you if it's difficult to overcome that challenge. As an aside to that principle, I have been operating under the following thought process in our own congregation. If our people want to listen to the most well-rehearsed, well-recorded, and well-mastered music, they can do that. It's called Spotify. If your people want to find the most well-researched, well-performed, and charismatic preaching, they can do that. There are lots of podcasts and other places to find those sermons online. Our congregants, though, are looking to be personally connected to their community and to God, and this is what we focus on. Those connections, those local meanings, those relationships. When we're putting something together, that's what we want to focus on first. Another principle that we're working off of is the KISS principle, and I know that there are different ways of explaining what KISS is, but I was taught that it's keep it simple, stupid. My father is an electrical engineer who used to build computers for jet fighters, like brand new, lots of weapons, lots of things going all at the same time, jet fighters. Lots of things going in and out of those computers. And what he told me has kept with me, the simpler the system, the more reliable that system is. Also, the more complicated and fancy that system is, the more you pay attention to the system itself. It becomes a distraction to what you're trying to use it for. So try and simplify what you are doing. Try and simplify what we are doing, and then work up from there. Work to the point to where you are focusing on what you need to focus, and keeping things simple so that when people are participating, they're messing with less buttons, or there's less distractions in the background, things like that. Allow your people to be your co-leaders, which is a nice way of saying you can't control everything, or you can't control what you can't control. As pastors, we like to control a lot. What kind of flour is used in a bread, what temperature the water is in baptism, scented or unscented candles. We want to present the symbols of worship in ways that don't distract or detract from what they are supposed to communicate. Except when people are at home and have the bread that they have, you can't control it. Or when gathering around a table, while also social distancing, we aren't so close to one another. I've heard some of the most interesting stand-ins people have used for communion over these past couple of weeks. I think, Tom, it was you who told me peanut butter and jelly. Very, very interesting, very creative. But you can't control people when they're at home. It's okay.
It was peanut butter and chocolate. But
Peanut butter and chocolate.
But still.
Okay. Peanut butter and chocolate. Better. But again, we can't control people when they are at home. We can't control their environments. But you can control how you lead them and lead our people to understand these things as symbols. So point out what is important. Make their experiences participatory. Find out what people are using and talk positively about how those things are pointing to what we are trying to point to in those symbols, whether that's communion bread, whether that's in where we place ourselves when we're worshiping, things like that. Let's see here. Yeah. Make the spiritual physical. I have been reading this and been discussing this in various groups over the last couple of weeks. Many of my congregants have been grieving the loss of the space of the sanctuary, their sanctuary. And so they're in their living rooms, they're in their kitchens, they're in wherever they are, wherever the Wi-Fi is good enough. And so let's help them connect themselves with something that connected that the sanctuary connected them to in the first place. So I haven't really found a replacement for People's Sanctuary, but I have been encouraging our congregation to set up their worship space and their time, use a candle, use an object, a cross, a picture. In many ways, our Catholic and Orthodox brothers and sisters have been doing this for years, using symbols, using objects that people can take with them and hold with them as they go along. And again, we, as good Reformed people, we need to remind people that they aren't idols, but instead they point towards something else, someone else, and that is God, that is grace, that is Christ. And friends, this is not an exhaustive list. I'm sure that y'all have been doing these things and probably more. And I'm really looking forward to our time of Q&A, and I can find out what y'all have been doing and other things that you've been challenged with. I do want to finally make a final point that you'll probably need to start planning that this temporary time in your congregations will have permanent effects. Some will say that they are super happy about being able to worship at home, while others are going to want to come right back into the sanctuary, dust off the chairs and go right back to where they've been sitting for the last 15 years. Some will find that they like being able to take the worship service with them, and so move from being in a live space to a more of a Netflixy type of situation with church. And all of this is going to be change, and with change comes trauma. And so I would invite you to take some time now, maybe on your own, maybe along with your church elders, to talk with your congregants and find out how they are feeling, how they are experiencing this time, and to gather those ideas together as leaders. And then use those pieces of information in your session meetings, in your committee meetings. And the more you talk about that, the more you give space to those worries and those or things that people are excited about. It will reduce the stress of those coming challenges that will be coming up. I'm going to be really looking forward to our Q&A time, and finding out what y'all are doing and talking with y'all a little bit more. However, Tom, like I said, has a couple of slides that he'd like to share with you. And so, Tom, take it away.
Okay, and it'll be a minute before we get to the slides, but I do want to start by saying this, and this was part of the description of what we were doing and why we were doing this for you and with you. When you signed up to be a commissioned pastor, you anticipated that you were going to write sermons, that you were going to lead Bible studies, that you were going to moderate meetings, that you were going to provide pastoral care. And now that we've had to respond to the need of taking worship online, now you also get to be a video content manager, and you get to be an online technician, and you get to try to figure out if GoPro works better than a smartphone, works better than a Vimeo, that works better than a Zoom meeting. Ideally, what we're going to do today is give you some tools to use your natural talents along with maybe some no-budget resources to be authentic to who you are as a worship leader and to be authentic to who your congregation is. Tim spoke of that. And also, by the end of this, I hope maybe we can just kind of bless this mess, that what you have to offer is just that. It's what appears to be an ordinary blessing, but it honors the Savior. So with that being said, I want to first cover what we're not covering today. There's an assumption that when the design team put this together, that we were 6 to 8 weeks into this pandemic, and that most, if not all of you, were already online. So we're not going to cover much of the technical aspect of getting online. We will answer your questions at the end if that can be of help to you. We've assumed that you've discovered YouTube and Facebook Live and Zoom and Vimeo. We're also made the assumption that you've made some decisions on whether you'll go live with your worship or that you'll pre-record and post later. If we've made that assumption incorrectly, we're going to send you, and I'm going to send you an email after this with some resources to help you both get started on the technical side and to juggle the decision of whether or not you want to go live or pre-recorded. We also made the assumption that you're going to make a commitment to either stay online for a time longer, or you are considering doing something hybrid in the future when the doors can open back up. I just kind of want to end saying that. This came across my Facebook feed yesterday, and it just feels like this is a perfect thing to share at this point in the webinar. I really hope that I get to be that person. I want to wear bunny slippers to church, I'm not gonna lie. As churches begin to use creatively online technology for worship and devotionals and meetings and pastoral care and mission projects, the value of continuing to use online worship and online technology is growing. Consider this. In the past 8 weeks, YouTube had 3 service interruptions due to bandwidth. And it's hard to conceive there would be a time when YouTube would be overrun. But there was 3 times in the last 8 weeks when it happened. The first 2 instances were on Sunday morning, March 15th and March 22nd. Those were the first 2 Sundays when churches were trying to take themselves online. And that 3rd instance was Easter morning. So there is value to staying online, even after we're able to open the doors. There was, by the way, an article, if you have access to New York Times, there was an article about churches and their consideration of going back online. As a communicator and working with more than a dozen presbyteries, each one of those presbyteries is now posting things for sessions to consider about going online. And even as late as last week, when I talked to the design team of the event on whether or not we even needed to do this since churches were likely going to open the doors, one of our design team members emailed me back saying this: it seems to me that worshiping online may be a hybrid solution even when we're holding in-person services, either temporarily as we ease back into place, or maybe in some cases permanently. I referenced my 85-year-old mother who told me yesterday that some of her friends are discussing never returning to the church building because they have discovered Zoom and other forms of recorded worship. That says 2 things. The fear runs very deep, and it may take a long time to return trust. It also says that aging people find that not having to get out in their car and move around is appealing, and that we may have to find new ways of doing ministry going forward. Some of us may have found it surprising that an older generation is embracing the move to online worship. Certainly that's some of the conversation that I've been hearing lately. As in my time as a communicator, I have found it a common belief that boomers and some Gen Xers kind of eschew the whole social media thing. However, Pew Research discovered that 68% of 50 to 64-year-olds and half of 65-year-olds are on Facebook in the United States. I would love to see how that demographic has changed in the past 2 months. So in discussing this workshop, we've also posited another interesting thought about being online, staying online, or going hybrid. In this time of moving worship online, there is a much greater potential that lurkers are on your video stream, much greater than they would have been somebody who would have gotten dressed on a Sunday morning, gotten into their car and gone to your church building. The option of peering in and seeing what you're about is far, far easier than gathering the courage to cross the threshold of your church doorway. So, and Tim brought some of this up. This raises a couple of questions. Are you going to take this online opportunity as something to continue into the future, or will you go back to what you were doing before? What is the value of meeting virtually, and what is the value of meeting together? Okay, is your brain exploding yet? As you ponder these great thoughts, and they are thoughts to be pondered, and they have been in countless blogs and articles and chat rooms, we need to address what we're addressing today. How do we create an authentic and beautiful worship service that honors my calling and honors the congregation? So I want to start with a tweet that was posted a couple of weeks ago by the Reverend Mark Hewerdine, or Hewerdine. I don't know him, so I don't know how to pronounce his name. He is an Anglican priest in the Withington Deanery of the Church of England. That tweet got retweeted thousands of times, and then it's made its way to Facebook, where it has been shared even more. And here's what he said. Hey, church people, faithfully streaming low-budget, shaky, amateur, daily prayer or Sunday service from your messy house because you want to serve your church community and offer what you can do to God in love. That's perfume poured over Jesus' feet. It's beautiful. Keep going. So here's your pastoral moment. Whatever you have been doing, whatever you might try and do, whatever you have to offer with a phone put on top of a stack of books, it is faithful, it is beautiful, and it is a gorgeous offering. So let's keep going. A common phrase that my younger daughter, who is an artist, says, the art that hangs in the Louvre is just as gorgeous as the outside the lines crayon scribbles that your grandchild hangs on your refrigerator. It is not the gift, it is the giver. So as we talk about technique, as we talk about style, as we talk about resources, please keep that pastoral moment in mind. No one said you had to succeed at this. Just bring your authentic self to creating worship, and whatever happens is going to be worshipful. So here's some nuts and bolts conversation. What are some of the options that you could consider doing if you haven't already considered? Here are some thoughts about taking your worship service online that you might find being closer to your personality and within your resources. Rather than doing an entire worship service, some have gone to doing something called a nice visit to the chapel. Retain the elements of good Presbyterian worship as defined by the Book of Order, but shorter and smaller. And confine your movements, if any, to just a selected part of the sanctuary. Think about recording your worship service outdoors, and we'll talk about lighting and sound in a minute, but consider doing something under a tree, in a garden, outside the church doors, on a walking path. Many pastors and commissioned pastors and lay people have taken to their living room, the study, the kitchen, their dining room. I think both Tim and I right now are in our offices. I've seen co-pastors preaching and teaching from their kitchen table. And some have taken to using web-based services like Doodly to create a chalkboard sermon. We're just publishing a story on tomorrow on the Presbytery of Northern Kansas newsletter about two commissioned pastors. They are in two different locations, relatively close to each other. And so rather than try to do two different worship services, they gather in one place or the other, and they're doing it together, inviting the two congregations to be together. So consider alternate locations. There is a little trend going around called the 90-second sermon. Doesn't that sound easier? One can lose one's attention when watching a talking head talk for 15 to 30 minutes. In fact, we may have lost some of you already. Maybe not 10, but I'm sure I have. Don't think of this element as a sermon as so much as a point in your worship service that's something to think about. Again, there it tends to be when a person is a static shot, like I am right now, talking at you, the mind, after literally about 90 seconds, begins to wander. So consider that as part of what you might do in your worship service. Some worship services create the idea that the viewer is an observer, rather than talking to the camera, as I'm doing now. They are used to projecting what in-person worship looked like before we had to close the doors. So they stayed with that formula as a way that works for them, and that may work for you. And this is also an approach that churches that were broadcasting their service before all of this hit, and so they're just continuing doing what they were doing before, just to an empty sanctuary. But it's very comforting to the people that were used to seeing it in that manner. Other folks are opting for a conversational approach, looking at the camera as opposed to being a viewer that just is observing what's going on. For those of you that labor in smaller congregations, your people may be more comfortable with that approach. So, what did some of these worship services look like online? Sally Watson, who is the General Presbyter for Mission Presbytery, spends her Sunday mornings going from one online worship service to another and taking screenshots of what the congregation of her presbytery are doing. So I wanted to share some of those with you today. And I also kind of got it into my head, what would it look like if a general presbyter showed up at your church for 10 minutes and magically disappeared, and showed up somewhere else for 10 minutes and magically disappeared? That is, to a large degree, what Sally Watson is doing in Grace Presbytery, and no doubt what some others are doing. So these are just a couple of screenshots, and by a couple, I mean like a whole bunch of slides. The church here, and I don't want to give away locations, but the church here on the left side of the screen actually didn't go virtual at all. They are now doing a drive-up worship service. They had to jump through a number of hoops with the county judge in order to keep things safe, but they moved what they were doing outside, and then for those who couldn't make it to be a part of that, they have a static camera that shows what they're doing. So that's a crazy option, something to think about. On the upper right is a pastor and his wife, and they are in there, apparently, looking like they are in their living room. And from there, that is where they're doing their worship and where they're leading their music. Bottom right, something that a great deal of people are doing. This is a church service, communion table in the foreground, the pulpit or lectern in the background, and the pastor, wearing traditional robes, is standing there, like what they would see on Sunday morning. The shot here on the left, same thing. The shot here on the upper right looks like a different place in the building, and this particular scene has a great deal of imagery in the front. Also, this pastor is using a technique called the technique of thirds. If you're in photography, then you know what that is, but that's placing yourself, if I'll do this for you, if you can see me up on the lower part of the screen, but placing yourself in such a way that the background and the foreground really come out and can be seen. Here on the bottom right is a pastor who chose to put a lot of stoles behind them, create a very colorful and a very worshipful kind of background. Someone here at their kitchen table on the left, someone who is, I would say, uncomfortably close to the camera on the upper right. And here we see on the bottom right is a pastor who has moved their worship experience outside. Trees in the background, leaning down into the camera rather than having the camera facing directly towards them. Here's another instance on the left of somebody who set themselves up. They are behind the pulpit, but they're looking at the camera. So it is as if you were standing in that area of the church and looking at them. The upper right, again, another example of using using the thirds method, where you see the organ and elements of the sanctuary in the background, and you see the pastor taking up only a part of the screen, but allowing you to see more of a kind of a tableau and more of what the church is seeing. Bottom right, another instance of somebody doing their worship service outside. We could talk to that pastor a little bit about their lighting, but we'll discuss that here in a minute. Here's another interesting shot. Here's another interesting shot of a pastor and how they're looking from the upper right, looking down and up into the camera. It's hard to tell from that particular picture if this pastor was looking at the camera or looking out. It looks like they're looking down. Here's another place where the pastor is not pretending, but appearing as if they are doing their worship service as if they would normally do it on Sunday morning. Down here on the bottom right, which I think is just an adorable picture, is a clergy couple sitting at their kitchen table, making their worship service happen. They worn some of the elements that they would wear on Sunday morning, but they're in a different place. So, having spoken and shown all this to you, if you choose to take, to go to the sanctuary or an alternate location, there are some things that you can do, and I hope I flooded your head with different ways and places and means and screens to look at. There are ways to improve the production value of what you're doing. And this is where we, to a certain extent, kind of fall into the danger of making worship a performance. The place where I go to attend worship, my wife and I go to attend worship, they frequently refer to their worship service as the show. So I want to be careful not to make that something to be concerned about. But on the other hand, I want you to think about how you can make yourself present a little clearer, a little more in presence. So you might forget sometimes when we're doing the worship service that there is someone on the other side of that screen struggling to see your face. So for the nepotism part of this webinar, I consulted with a recent graduate of the Mary Moody Northern Theater Program at St. Edward's University. This Bachelor of Fine Arts actress studied video production and has more than a few things to say about production value. And yes, I'm talking about my eldest daughter. But she did study video production, and when I brought this to her, she had a few things for us to consider when getting ready to record worship. So here are Grace Ann Riggs's 4 things, to consider. When it comes to lighting and sound, one of the things, in particular lighting, please set up the camera and make a sample recording of yourself in the location that you've chosen. Can you see yourself clearly? Are you backlit, meaning is the light source behind you? Can you position yourself near a window? Oftentimes the lighting in your space is adequate for your needs, but you don't know unless you've seen the sample recording of what it is. In terms of artificial light, one thing that I recommend that doesn't cost you any money is a desk lamp craned upward or a floor lamp without the lampshade on it. That can provide adequate lighting in dark places. And to give you an example of that, it didn't work too well. You can see my face getting brighter. That is because literally right over here, I have a desk lamp that I've pulled the shade all the way up so that you can see my face more. It is my face, however, so I apologize for that. Some people think it's important, particularly in a worship space, to be lit from the bottom. And that means you don't necessarily need to have a light showing up from the bottom of your face, making you look like Bela Lugosi in a vampire movie. But on the other hand, you might consider some sort of reflective piece that sits on your floor that angles the light up towards your face. And this can be as simple as cardboard wrapped in aluminum foil. Again, I promised you low to no budget ideas. Okay, one place that I've seen this used particularly well was somebody who had a reflective car window shield, like the kind you put up when it's really hot so it's not burning up your dashboard. It's reflective. It will reflect light upwards. So some things to think about lighting, particularly, very important here. Look first. Go to your outdoor location. Go to your living room. Go to your sanctuary. Record yourself and see what it looks like. Okay, in terms of sound, if you're using a smartphone or an attached microphone to a camera, chances are you may not be heard from a distance without shouting. 20 to 25 feet is about as much as you can expect to be away from a camera phone and being able to be heard. Now, there are lots of Bluetooth lapel microphones that you can purchase, but there are some ingenious, cheap fixes, and I forgot to do this ahead of time. But if you can imagine, this is the microphone end of my iPhone 11. Some people literally put an open cup over the end with the bottom cut out, and that creates a cone. I know this is very, very rudimentary. This is something that they're doing in the 2nd and 3rd grade Sunday school class. But if you have a cone that helps sap in some of that sound, you can literally move from about 20 to 25 feet back to maybe 30 to 35 feet back. And again, make a sample recording of yourself in the location you've chosen. If you find it hard to hear yourself when the volume is turned up about halfway, you may need to move closer to your microphone or consider a Bluetooth microphone. And environment. In addition to being observant about the sound and lighting qualities of where you're located, be cognizant of the background and environmental elements. For example, if you're in a sanctuary, you may find that the echo in there can either make you sound like James Earl Jones playing the part of Darth Vader, or you can sound like you're in an unintelligible echo chamber. If you're outside, ambient noise like airplanes or cars or the wind might be a hindrance. So observe what your viewers will see in the background and what they will hear in the background. You saw in some of those pictures that these pastors got very creative if they weren't just standing in the sanctuary. Will children or pets be an unwelcome distraction if filming in your house? Or will that just be adorable? It could be a little of both. My wife and I recently were watching an online worship service from our church. They pre-record. The pastor was preaching from his dining room, and just over his left shoulder was a magnificent piece of artwork. And I'm embarrassed to say that I found myself distracted by the painting to the point that I realized I wasn't exactly paying attention to him as I was looking at that painting. So I've seen worship elements delivered from the front seat of a car, from a garden, from a field, and even from a closet. Filming in your office with a background of books may seem authoritative. If you're Tim Gray and you have a TV over your left shoulder, you might find that to be very entertaining, or it could be distracting. I would find it entertaining. Filming,
By the way,
yes.
Tom, what we did was we did a 4-hour record in the sanctuary, and I just cast the video of a silent sanctuary with plants going like this in the wind right behind me. People really do like seeing that space.
That's perfect. Thank you. Filming in the garden, filming in your office with a background of books may make you seem authoritative. Or I think I just saw you mouth the words boring, Tim. Maybe, okay. Filming in the garden may seem as familiar. Recording in your dining room may be seen as familial. Consider, find these places and look at them for your own potential places of worship and how you can project, again, what's authentic to you and what's authentic to your congregation. As Tim said, the use of candles, flowers, chalice, bread on a plate, artwork, these remind viewers of worshipful things. Again, last Sunday at my particular church, when they were doing the worship service, they came to the part of communion and they reminded us if you haven't got your bread or something out. And the pastor held up 2 dishes, and one of them had peanut butter and one of them had chocolate, and that was going to be their bread and their liquid, he says, strangely. And I found 2 things. One, it rubbed me all the wrong ways liturgically, but it rubbed me all the right ways in terms of playfulness. And I found myself going, well, when we had bread and some grape juice there, I found myself going, we have chocolate cake. We could have been using that. So environment, things that you can bring, elements that you can bring in. Finally, the camera setup. Angles, and this is the last of the 4 points from the esteemed Grace Riggs. Camera setup. The angles and position are important for what the viewer sees. If you opt for a straight-on approach, you do that so the viewer can look you in the eyes. An angle pointed up at the speaker can give a sense of authority. An angle pointed down, like a selfie, can give a sense of familiarity. If you have, as we mentioned a couple of times, if you have a beautiful background, consider using the rule of thirds, where you position yourself on one side of the camera frame and leave room for people to see where you are and what is in your background. There are just as many ways to set up a camera angles on a tripod as there is any other way, barring that as a possibility of having a tripod. Use a table and a stack of books to set up your elements in your camera. I've seen instances of the worship leader moving in space and a camera person, being the tripod, following them around. There was a cute picture on Facebook. If you're familiar with Shannon Kirshner, she's the senior pastor at Second Presbyterian Church in Chicago. And she set up in her living room, and they had lighting elements and they had microphone elements and all of that. And everything was set up on tables and books. So use what you have. Before we go to questions, and I see a few of them there, I want to go back to the tweet that I mentioned previously. We've crammed a lot into 50 minutes here. Well, while being cognizant of what you have to offer, what lighting and sound you have available, what background is available, and who is watching, also live into the thought that what you are doing isn't anything short of offering the gift of worship to those in your care. Shaky, amateur video is a blessing. You are a blessing. The willingness to participate and to lead is a blessing. Which reminded me of Thomas Merton's prayer. And I think it's a really great way to end me blabbering for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I think it's a great way to end our time. So if you would, let us pray. My Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me, and I cannot be for certain where it will end. Nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I am following your will or setting up the camera shot right does not mean that I'm actually doing your will. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope that I have that desire in all that I'm doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore, I will trust you always. Though I may seem lost and in the shadow of death, I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone. Amen. I did a little paraphrasing there in the middle of the prayer. Tim, if you will unmute yourself, let's see if we can answer a few questions. So, one question, any suggestions for rural areas with poor to no internet connection?
So we actually have several rural, oh, Valerie wants to answer the question. Wait, Valerie? Well, I'll just really quick, and then Valerie can step in. We actually have several rural no internet people in our congregation, and what we do is, for those who do have computers, we take the video file of the worship service, put it on there, and hand it over in an envelope with gloved hands, and then we also print off the worship service for those who don't have computers, internet, or anything like that. And again, we hand deliver those.
Another suggestion would be, in fact, I got a question by email about this last night. The idea of recording your worship service and using, and there's a lot of online services that do this. I can put this in the resource sheet that we'll email to you. Recording your worship via video, but then converting it to an audio file, and sending that out in terms of, does anybody remember when we sent out tapes, or we sent out CDs, or we can just send it or do this over the phone. That's one of the things that's good about the Zoom protocol, is that you can go on audio and video. So, and then if you record to YouTube or you record to Facebook Live or Vimeo, there are converter programs online that they're free. You have to put up with ads, but they're free, and they can convert them to sound files that you can then more easily email to someone, and they can hear what was going on in your worship service. Another person writes, our congregation is really enjoying meeting on Zoom and seeing our winter Texan friends who have already gone home, and family and friends as far as Ireland. The session is in discussion about live streaming or Facebook living. I think we just made up a word. Once we go back into the sanctuary, I think that's I think we both talked about this a little bit. That is this is not this is an adaptive change. This is not a technical change, and that you may be, and some of the people in your congregation are saying, how can we do this and keep doing this? Tim, you want to say something on this?
Well, and it's both adaptive and technical, and again, to follow the adaptive challenge first, and the technical challenges will come along the way. How do we allow Valerie to answer for that first one?
Oh, Valerie Young is trying to get in?
Well, that's what it says on mine.
Okay.
Valerie would like to answer this question live.
She may need to text one of us. Look at us being very good with technical and technological things. Look at us going. How do you record? How do you share a recorded Zoom service? Actually, I skipped a question, so we'll come back to that. I understand there will be lasting effects from video worship. Some will opt to stay home and worship with us via Zoom. I'm good with that. But how do we justify increasing costs of aging facilities when even less people are worshiping in the sanctuary? Tim?
I mean, you have to balance it. We have been doing this. Thankfully, I mean, we're in a congregation that has a fairly wealthy base, and so we are just gathering data of, look, we have someone from, who's in who's in the Middle East. Look, we have someone from, Texas, or from Florida. We have someone on the other side of Texas. We have, and there are people who literally, even if you told them, no, you're going to have to show up in service to participate with us, that can't do that. And so then the question is, how do you do something that's consistent How do you do something that's cheap enough? And how do you do something that's simple enough that the challenges of participating, challenges of keeping that going, are low enough that make it work? I can't tell you an answer. I would also say you also have a whole lot of, I'm sure there are extra phones around in your rolling around in your congregation. A iPhone for 5 years ago. Well, I will tell you, the iPhone from 5 years ago has a better lens than your laptop or any computer that you can buy on the market right now. Also has better microphones, and so making something work is kind of what we've been doing as churches for a very long time. And finding someone who can help you think that through is going to be really helpful.
Then again, the question of how do you share a recorded Zoom service? I will put into the resource page a way that essentially Zoom you can take the recording, you can convert it to an MP3, you can convert it to a video file, and then you can place that file on Facebook Live, you can place it on YouTube, or send it out as you'd like. I know this particular person who asked the question, so give me a call later and we can discuss more. The next comment, good idea, outside. I videoed a devotional of my Facebook from my backyard while rocking on my rocking chair. I received so many positive comments. I never thought provide worship outside. The only comment I would add to that is do it now, because summer's coming. Now, it could be that I'm just speaking as a Texan, but you might want to think about doing that soon.
I would also say,
yeah.
So it's super familiar, also super difficult to control the audio inputs from around you. My backyard, my butts up to our neighbors, and they have chickens. And the first time I did that, I did it at some time when the chickens were super active, and the chickens were on there with me.
All right.
So just keep in mind.
I have a part-time gig as the public address announcer for the Texas Rangers youth baseball team or club, and so I do a lot of PA announcing outside. From the voice of experience, if you have a separate microphone when you're recording outside, you're not using your smartphone, or even if you are, you might want to consider something as simple as a sock to help kind of block the wind. That can be overwhelming when more than chickens. It can be overwhelming. So do consider that when recording or doing something live outside. My small congregation likes the interactivity of Zoom for worship, but would also like to record for online. Any recommendations? The Zoom record feature is too messy. It is, and particularly if you are in speaker mode or gallery mode, that can be cacophonous on your eyes. Again, I go back to take the recording from Zoom and convert that to another file that you can share possibly on YouTube. Now, another function that Zoom has, and I'm going to forgive me, Pastor, for I have sinned. One of the things that I am not good at, or what I haven't learned how to do yet, is Zoom can push to YouTube and it can push to Facebook Live. There are some technical issues that you have to resolve. And Tim just told me today that if you're going to push to Facebook Live from Zoom, please don't depend on Wi-Fi. You may want to hardwire your computer to do that. And even then, yeah. Tim, I think you said you've had some bad luck with that.
So yeah, Facebook has been really inconsistent for us, although we haven't tried for the last 4 weeks, because as soon as Facebook failed on us twice, we went right to YouTube. In YouTube, you just want to check your internet connection. So what we actually do here, because I have a better internet connection than the person who's running the, we do a video hybrid on Zoom. So what I do is actually start the streaming on my computer, which then uses my internet connection, and then hand over hosting to someone else at a different location where they can push the video. So just think about your internet connection and how good it needs to be. But the nice thing about pushing to YouTube is that as soon as it's done doing its live feed, it's available as a recorded video ready to go.
Right. Last comment was just a comment, very informational. Zoom has extended our outreach to family and friends in the lower 48. And this is from someone in Alaska. One of the things that I've noticed, and I've been able to do with our own worship service from our church that we watch on Sunday mornings, is that we have a good friend who lives in Cleveland. I'm in the Dallas area. We have a good friend who lives in Cleveland. They have had a difficult time finding a church family. They have found that attending our live worship or watching the recorded worship has been very uplifting to them. It's been very, very helpful. And again, I go back to the comment of not only are people lurking, as it were, that they're stepping into your sanctuary virtually, or stepping into your worship space virtually, and perhaps they never would have done so in some other ways. This is also another thing that's happening as a result of virtual worship, is that the family can say, okay, all of us are going to watch now. Hey, we're all going to go to Tim's church on Sunday, and next Sunday, let's all go to Tom's church. And I've heard people use that term as if they were actually going to the building. So,
I've also,
yes. Oh, okay.
well, I've also heard people like maxing out on church. They go to like 4 or 5 or 6 services. But I would go back to, people can find really well recorded music online. They can find really well researched charismatic preaching online. What they're looking for in your church is familiarity, relationships, connections, people who know them and that they know. Use that for what you're doing, and I would agree. Your churches are probably extending further than they have for a while.
Well, we have kept you for an hour and 5 minutes, which, Tim, I want to congratulate us on doing a good job, keeping it in an hour. We're feeling good.
Almost.
So, again, thank you on behalf of the design team of the event, thank you for signing up. Thank you for being a part of this conference. We are looking forward to seeing you in October in Richardson. Be paying attention to your email. There are announcements about more webinars that we'll be doing that will be for this group of people that have signed up for the conference. And we want to encourage you again, if you know somebody who would benefit from being a part of the conference or benefit from these webinars, send you to synodson.org/ECPC. That's Empowering Commission Pastors Conference. Send people there and go ahead and sign up. So a blessed and happy Thursday to you. I look forward to hearing from you by email. Please look forward to hearing from me in the next day or maybe Monday with a little source of resources. So with that, we bid you goodbye. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Phil.